For months, he said nothing, allowing the palace's carefully crafted silence to thicken around him like smoke curling through locked corridors. While the crown spun its polished narrative and courtiers tightened their circle to protect the king's agenda, Prince William stood unmoving, observing, weighing, enduring. But silence is never neutral, and his was starting to feel like a warning. And today, after weeks of whispers and mounting tension, the heir to the throne finally shattered that silence. With a single, deliberate statement, controlled in tone yet explosive in implication, William confirmed what the monarchy had desperately tried to contain. He was breaking from the king's most closely guarded plans. What had been speculation hardened into reality. A reality that rocked Buckingham Palace and sent tremors through every royal insider who understood the magnitude of a future king refusing to fall in line. A fracture long forming in shadows had now erupted into public view, and the House of Windsor would never return to the version of itself it had been just hours before this revelation. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William's decision to go public wasn't impulsive. It was precise, timed with the kind of strategic intent that suggested weeks, if not months, of inner turmoil. His statement emerged just as details from a confidential royal summit began leaking into the press, suggesting that the growing divide between father and son was reaching a breaking point behind closed doors. Some insiders insist William had tried desperately to sway the king privately, advocating for a different approach, pleading for caution, urging his father to consider the long-term impact of the reforms Charles was preparing to unveil. But every attempt, they say, had been shut down with a mixture of royal authority and a stubbornness that made compromise impossible. When persuasion failed, William retreated not out of surrender, but preparation. His silence had not been an act of compliance, but a gathering of strength. The fallout from his statement took mere minutes to erupt. Within the hour, media outlets across the country mobilized emergency panels. Royal reporters scrambled to make calls, and insiders on opposing sides of the divide began leaking their own versions of the truth. Some painted William as a steady hand pushed too far. Others suggested he was jeopardizing unity for ambition. But what unified every interpretation was the recognition that something had fundamentally shifted, and there would be no quieting the storm now. Even footage from recent engagements between Charles and William, moments once dismissed as routine stiffness, took on new meaning under the lens of this rupture. Snippets of strained handshakes, clipped exchanges, and carefully avoided glances resurfaced across broadcasts, fueling the firestorm. And then there was Catherine. Her quiet absence from official channels in the days leading up to William's announcement fed speculation that she had stepped back intentionally, refusing to appear in support of the king's agenda. Insiders claim she had been the sole person William confided in completely during the tense lead-up, and her silence now read less like neutral distance and more like a deliberate refusal to endorse the direction Charles was forcing upon the monarchy. Her absence added emotional weight to William's declaration, suggesting that the fracture extended beyond policy, touching the very nucleus of the future royal family. The public sensed something raw beneath the polished words of William's statement, a conviction, a breaking point, a truth that had become too heavy to carry quietly. And while his message avoided direct contradiction of the king, the subtext was unmistakable. He could no longer support what his father intended to impose. It was a declaration of identity, of conscience, of future direction, and it left the monarchy standing on a precipice. But what exactly were the king's plans, and why did William find them so dangerous, so untenable, that he risked detonating a public schism? Behind palace doors, King Charles wasn't just streamlining tradition, he was preparing a total redefinition of monarchy itself. Fewer royals, fewer obligations, and a ruthless reordering of power. But as Charles pushed forward with his so-called sunset reform, whispers began to surface that not everyone agreed with the culling of the crown. William wasn't just hesitant, he was horrified. What Charles envisioned was more than a modernization, it was a reshaping of the monarchy's very structure, a consolidation of influence that left little room for the extended royal network. Gone were the days of wide-reaching royal patronages and shared ceremonial duties. Under the Sunset Reform, the monarchy would be reduced to its barest elements. A tight circle of senior royals operating under streamlined visibility and centralized authority. It was efficiency, cloaked in regality, but beneath the surface, it felt like an erasure. Entire branches of the family, those who had stood beside the throne through decades of service, would find themselves quietly phased out, publicly honored, privately discarded. At the heart of this sweeping vision was Queen Camilla. Her presence had grown more formidable in recent years, but now she was shaping policy from within. Advisors close to the king revealed that Camilla's influence had become integral to Charles's reform strategies. She wasn't just supporting change, she was driving it. Weekly planning meetings, strategic guest lists, and silent removals from family engagements bore her fingerprints. Camilla's rise was not just symbolic, it was surgical. Her understanding of public image, power perception, and internal control made her a force William could no longer ignore. Within this landscape of recalibration, William found himself increasingly isolated. While publicly fulfilling his role with composure, behind closed doors he grew uneasy. Trusted only by a small inner circle, Princess Anne, Prince Edward, and Catherine, he voiced concerns that this reform didn't just remove unnecessary titles, it cut away at the very institution his children were meant to inherit. The Inner Four, as they quietly became known, began sharing information discreetly, exchanging frustrations and fears about the king's intentions. They questioned the speed, the secrecy, and the scope. Then came the Highgrove memos, internal communications drafted by senior aides, outlining scenarios in which succession influence could be rerouted through executive advisory panels, effectively diminishing William's input in future constitutional matters. Though the memos never directly threatened his position as heir, they suggested a model where the monarch, advised by a new corps of unelected strategists, could bypass traditional heir influence in public-facing decisions. To William, it was a warning shot cloaked in diplomacy. The signs became harder to ignore. William began withdrawing from certain high-profile events that bore the unmistakable stamp of reform strategy. His absence was never explained, never acknowledged, but it spoke louder than any statement. Subtle at first, then undeniable, the Crown Prince was drawing his own boundary in the royal sand. And with each step back, the gap between father and son widened. But long before William's statement, the internal resistance had already begun, and it started in the most unlikely place, Sandringham. While public eyes were fixed on royal ceremonies, an underground current was shifting at Sandringham. There, a forgotten chamber once used by Queen Elizabeth for discreet consultations, became the staging ground for what aides now call the quiet coup. Hidden letters, encoded briefings, and a circle of royal allies began crafting a response to the king's plan, and William was at the center of it. It started with a document quietly passed between gloved hands during an unremarkable luncheon at Sandringham. Labeled in careful calligraphy as personal correspondence, it was anything but ordinary. Inside, Prince William had detailed his deep reservations about the trajectory of the monarchy under King Charles, highlighting not only ideological rifts but also legal ambiguities that, if left unchecked, could erode the very principles the Crown claimed to uphold. This letter would become the foundation of the now infamous Sandringham dossier, a collection of communications, hand-delivered rather than digitally transmitted, shared exclusively with a select circle of senior royals who had grown increasingly alarmed at the king's consolidation of power. Facilitating these private discussions was none other than the Queen's former private secretary, a figure long trusted across generations. Though officially retired, he remained a discreet fixture in the background, summoned only when matters veered into dangerous constitutional territory. It was under his guidance that the secret chamber at Sandringham, once used for Queen Elizabeth's most sensitive audiences, was reopened and repurposed as a crisis nerve center. It was here that raw truths were spoken, legal counsel was sought, and a strategy began to take shape. Among the first to rally behind William was Princess Anne. Known for her stoic public image, behind closed doors she was incandescent with fury over the so-called Sunset Reform. To her, it was not merely a restructuring, It was an affront to the decades of duty and dignity upheld by those Charles now seemed eager to cast aside. Anne's influence within the family was formidable, and her open alliance with William electrified the private resistance, giving it historical weight and emotional momentum. She reportedly warned that, should the reforms go forward unchecked, the royal house risked dismantling itself from within, brick by brick. William's next move was audacious. He initiated conversations with constitutional experts without informing the palace's official legal advisors. The topic was clear. Could the heir to the throne intervene in royal reforms without directly challenging the monarch? Could precedent and the sovereign's oath be used to expose overreach masked as modernization? The questions were dangerous, the implications even more so. Every answer he received pointed to a sobering truth. Charles was within his right as monarch, but William had moral ground and potentially public sentiment on his side. As the meetings grew more frequent, palace security grew suspicious. One aide, long considered loyal to the late Queen, was quietly dismissed after being caught photographing a marked envelope near William's study. The leak never reached the press, but internally, it triggered a tightening of access. New codes were issued, schedules rearranged, and an unspoken wariness crept into every hallway. Despite the crackdown, the circle held strong. They called themselves the Council of Four: William, Anne, Edward, and Catherine, and they bound themselves in secrecy under an old Windsor Accord once designed to protect the monarchy from foreign influence. Now, it was being used to protect it from itself. Yet no secret stays buried forever, and soon, the king would learn of the mutiny through a betrayal from within. What began as a whisper campaign escalated into a brutal palace maneuver. Sources allege it was Queen Camilla herself who discovered the secret Sandringham network and acted with devastating precision, leaking select pages, planting press suspicions, and forcing a confrontation that neither Charles nor William could avoid. She played the game of monarchy like a seasoned queenmaker and left no room for neutrality. It started with an intercepted envelope, a discreet note exchanged between two senior aides within William's camp had somehow fallen into the wrong hands, and whispers inside Clarence House suggest that it was Camilla who first sounded the alarm. What followed was not a confrontation, but a strategy. She understood the stakes. This wasn't just a rebellion. It was a potential reorientation of royal power, a revolt wrapped in loyalty. And so, piece by calculated piece, she dismantled it. Select lines from the intercepted correspondence, stripped of full context, began circulating among favoured members of the royal press. Tabloids suddenly ran with headlines about William's private crisis, quoting unnamed courtiers describing him as withdrawn, hesitant to lead, and influenced by legacy loyalists. The intention was surgical: cast doubt on his stability, question his readiness, and isolate him without lifting a single crown finger in public. At Clarence House, the response was just as strategic. Without issuing any formal changes, Charles began pulling back William's access to confidential briefings. He was no longer included in certain high-level discussions regarding Commonwealth restructuring. His aides were replaced without explanation. There were no official demotions, just quiet removals, discreet shifts, and a subtle erasure from corridors where future kings were once groomed. It was control, masquerading as formality. And William, already reeling from the breach of trust, chose not to retaliate publicly. He vanished from the narrative. No statements, no reactions, only silence. That silence, however, spoke volumes. It was not surrender, it was recalibration. But to the outside world, his disappearance from official engagements deepened the mystery. Was he backing down, being punished, or plotting his next move? The media frenzy only grew, fed by Clarence House's ongoing campaign of selective truth and polished optics. Camilla, seen smiling at charity events, became the steadying force in the public's eyes, while William, the once assured heir, was painted as fractured and unreliable. And then came Catherine. Her role in this unfolding storm became the subject of fierce speculation. Some insiders claimed she was frantically trying to mediate between her husband and the king, urging diplomacy and silence over escalation. Others whispered that she had made her choice and it wasn't in favor of compromise. Her sudden absence from palace engagements sent conflicting signals. Was she shielding her family, or distancing herself from a firestorm too dangerous to touch? What was undeniable, though, was that her silence mirrored William's. And in the monarchy, silence from both future sovereigns could only mean one thing: division at the highest level. But while the palace waged its war in shadows and silence, the public began to sense that something far more profound was unraveling, something that could shake the very lineage of the crown. This wasn't just a clash of policies, it was about blood, inheritance, and the soul of the crown. Sources claim William had uncovered aspects of Charles's succession framework that would diminish not only his power but the influence of his children. In protecting the crown, William now faced the unthinkable, challenging his own father for the future of his bloodline. Buried within the Sunset Reform's fine print was a clause that changed everything. It outlined a deferral of ceremonial responsibilities for any royal under the age of 25, an ostensibly modern gesture aimed at shielding young heirs from the spotlight. But to William, this wasn't compassion, it was erasure. Prince George, already groomed with quiet care for his future as king, would now be deliberately kept on the periphery, relegated to symbolic appearances without any substantive role. It wasn't just a delay, it was a strategic sidelining, a message that tradition and bloodline were no longer the monarchy's compass. That shift struck a deep nerve in William. The reform didn't just alter how power was exercised, it risked altering who would eventually hold it. Charles, according to those closest to the reform's design, had become increasingly invested in shaping a monarchy defined by public mood, diplomacy, and soft influence, one where the weight of heritage would no longer dictate authority. He envisioned a crown not built on lineage, but curated symbolism. But in doing so, he began to unfasten the very framework that had held the monarchy together for centuries. And, for William, who had endured the pain, pressure, and preparation of being heir, this wasn't just a disagreement, it was a betrayal. A monarchy that placed ideology over inheritance threatened to make his children figureheads without footing, royal in name but irrelevant in practice. Princess Anne, who had watched generations rise and fall from within the palace's iron core, saw the danger as clearly as William did. According to palace insiders, she warned her nephew that precedence, the invisible code that structured the royal pecking order, was being dangerously undermined. "If they untie the order," she reportedly said, "they'll forget who holds the crown until it slips." Her words echoed like prophecy. The monarchy wasn't just in transition, it was teetering toward fragmentation, where blurred roles and unclear succession could splinter it from within. Amid this storm, a new debate erupted, quiet at first, then deafening among insiders. Should bloodline dictate destiny, or should ideology redefine the future? The question was existential. For centuries, the monarchy's legitimacy had come from its unbroken line, its sacred passage from crown to crown, blood to blood. But now, the king himself was suggesting that hereditary right could be secondary to public perception, optics, and policy. It was evolution to some, revolution to others. William, tormented by both the principle and the personal, began consulting royal, constitutional scholars in secret. He needed clarity. Could an heir challenge the foundational direction of a reigning monarch? Were there levers, quiet or constitutional, that could safeguard not just his position, but the generational continuity of the monarchy itself? The answers were complex, but they shared a common thread. Once a crown changes its meaning, it can never return to what it was. The urgency became impossible to ignore. But before legal remedies could be explored, William would face a far more personal test, one that would pit loyalty to family against duty to legacy. It happened in Windsor, behind locked doors and without aides. Father and son, heir and monarch face to face, in what royal insiders describe as a thunderous, heartbreaking showdown. Words were said that cannot be unsaid. Accusations, resentments, betrayals long buried erupted like a volcano. When the doors opened, William walked out, and everything changed. The private meeting had been requested quietly, without ceremony. No advisors, no note-takers, just two men bound by blood and burden. For weeks, tension had roiled beneath the surface, but this was the moment everything spilled out. William entered, prepared to draw a line. What he did not expect, according to palace sources, was the wall he would hit. He accused his father of sacrificing the bloodline for image-replacing legacy with optics, replacing George's rightful place with symbolic policies that would render the heir little more than a poster child. It wasn't just disagreement, it was devastation. This was not the monarchy William had prepared his children for. This was a vision that erased their future under the guise of reform. Charles, caught between tradition and reinvention, did not fold. He fired back, accusing William of fomenting division within the family, of undermining unity for the sake of sentimentality. He defended the Sunset Reform not as a betrayal, but as survival. The monarchy had to evolve, or perish, he insisted, and William's refusal to bend was dragging the crown backward. The words were sharp, deliberate. For a man known to temper emotion with duty, Charles's tone was reportedly one of both pain and firmness. But William, still reeling from the quiet marginalization of his role, was unmoved. To him, evolution that destroyed the very line of succession wasn't progress, it was peril. The argument escalated, voices raised, tempers flared, and with each exchange, the chasm widened. Charles insisted that William's proximity to Anne and Edward had made him resistant to change. William countered that his father's reliance on Camilla and her advisors had made him blind to consequence. At one point, insiders claim William uttered the words that became the headline whispered in every royal corridor. Then, I will no longer support the reform. It wasn't a threat. It was a declaration of independence, a fracture that could not be mended. By the time Camilla arrived, summoned, midway through the eruption, it was too late. Whatever she intended to say, whatever mediation she had prepared, was drowned by the silence that followed. The conversation was over. Charles remained seated, stoic and unmoving. William turned, walked out, and never returned to the private dinner that had been scheduled for that evening. His security detail was called, his vehicle prepared, and just like that, he was gone. Royal heirs do not contradict reigning monarchs until now. In a rare breach of royal protocol, Prince William issued a public declaration of intent, calmly worded but thunderously clear. It sent a seismic signal to royal watchers. He was not aligning with the king. And just like that, the crown was split in two. The statement came without fanfare, buried in the middle of a longer essay published under William's name in a policy journal that few in the public had even heard of yet within hours. Its meaning ignited a firestorm across the globe. On the surface, it read, like a measured meditation on modern leadership, constitutional evolution, and institutional responsibility. But between the lines, it was a manifesto, a controlled rebellion, dressed in polite language but fueled by quiet fury. Nowhere in the statement was King Charles mentioned. Nowhere was there any direct reference to the Sunset Reform, but every sentence bristled with resistance. William affirmed his loyalty to true constitutional continuity, a pointed phrase that royal analysts immediately interpreted as a direct rebuke to his father's sweeping restructuring. It was a message not just to the public but to the palace itself. William was not going to remain silent. He was choosing principle over protocol. The power of the moment was amplified days later, when Catherine, during a solo appearance at a children's hospice charity, spoke briefly about stability, duty, and inherited responsibility. The phrase echoed almost word-for-word language from William's essay. The palace insisted it was coincidence. But no one believed that. Royal watchers understood the choreography. It was a synchronized signal, a subtle but unmistakable show of unity. The future queen was standing firmly beside the future king, not behind the current one, and in that silent alignment, they redrew the battlefield lines. This was no longer a philosophical disagreement. It was a succession-level standoff. William's press allies moved quickly to reinforce the narrative. Quietly briefed, several senior commentators began penning op-eds, framing William's stance as the embodiment of the monarchy's future, not a break from tradition, but a return to its deepest essence. His refusal to support Charles's reforms was recast not as defiance, but as guardianship. He was, in their words, not resisting change, he was resisting erosion. The language was elegant, but the implication was sharp. Charles had overreached, and William was now the rightful compass of the crown. Mainstream media couldn't ignore the story any longer. The BBC began editorializing the generational divide, painting it as a clash between old guard survivalism and new era stewardship. The Times of London ran a headline that said it all. 2 crowns, 1 kingdom. Even global outlets picked up the shift. In Australia, Canada, and across the Commonwealth, journalists began floating a term that had once seemed unthinkable: the new prince's path. The title echoed across headlines, talk shows, and podcasts. William hadn't just challenged the monarchy, he had rebranded it. And yet, even as the world absorbed the fracture, a final twist emerged, one that had been quietly unfolding in parallel and would change everything. Hidden in a vault. A clause attached not to a crown, but to a legacy. Diana's estate held a secret stipulation, long sealed but now invoked by William in the wake of royal rupture. And with it, the memory of the people's princess returned not as nostalgia but as leverage. For years, the contents of Diana's private trust were protected under layers of legal discretion, locked within the Spencer family's inner sanctum and guarded by silence and time. But buried within its provisions was a clause few ever knew existed, one that permitted her heir, upon reaching full majority and under extraordinary circumstances, to make symbolic declarations in her name, reflective of causes she championed or injustices she anticipated. William had never needed it until now. When the monarchy fractured and his public statement shook the royal order, the Spencer Clause became more than a document. It became a weapon. Not against the crown, but for the soul of it. And as he invoked it, the world held its breath. In a quiet but deliberately timed announcement, William released a declaration invoking his mother's name, aligning her vision with his own. A monarchy that serves, not dominates, that evolves without erasing. It was personal, poignant, and piercingly political. He spoke of compassion, dignity, the importance of human connection within the institution of monarchy, words Diana had lived, suffered for, and died believing in. It wasn't rebellion, it was restoration, and the emotional resonance hit the public like a tidal wave. Within hours, comparisons flooded the airwaves. Clips of Diana's 1995 panorama interview resurfaced, with her haunting line, "There were 3 of us in this marriage," replayed beside William's fresh vow to uphold the humanity that my mother believed must remain at the monarchy's heart. It was more than a callback, it was a reckoning. Diana's voice, once silenced by tragedy, now echoed through her son in a moment of royal revolution. The outpouring was instantaneous. Across social media, crowds outside palaces, and late-night broadcasts, the tide turned. This wasn't just public sympathy, it was a surge of emotional loyalty. Inside the palace, the reaction was swift and volatile. Charles, according to insiders, was blindsided. He had expected public pushback, perhaps even William's media maneuvering, but not this, not the invocation of Diana. It struck a nerve deeper than any political disagreement. For all their differences, Charles had long harbored a complex, guilt-ridden relationship with her legacy. And now, that legacy had been reclaimed publicly, legally, and morally by their son. Reports say Charles was furious behind closed doors, but legally powerless to block the move. The clause had been crafted with Spencer family protections. The king could do nothing but watch as the narrative left him behind. Polling data in the days that followed revealed a dramatic swing in public sentiment. Approval for William surged. Among younger generations, support for a Diana-anchored monarchy nearly doubled overnight. Even former critics of the crown softened, swayed not by political gamesmanship but by the emotional force of a son invoking his mother's name to define his destiny. And then, another jolt, an unreleased recording of Diana emerged, obtained through the Spencer estate, in which she confided her fear that the monarchy would one day turn in on itself. Her words were clear. "If that day comes, I hope my boys remember who they are." And as the monarchy reels from emotional earthquakes and shifting power, one question remains. Is this the end of an era or the beginning of William's reign in all but name? With silence broken and the kingdom watching, a new royal reality emerges, fractured, uncertain, and charged with destiny. Charles holds the crown, but William holds the future. And somewhere between legacy and ambition, the House of Windsor now walks a tightrope between rupture and renewal. The crown is no longer singular, and the world will never see it the same again. The divide that once lived in whispers has now written itself into the official royal calendar. Engagements once shared between monarch and heir are now curated along separate tracks. No longer does William accompany his father on ceremonial visits. His appearances are distinct, solo, and symbolic. Each handshake, each speech, each quiet smile beneath a national flag now carries its own weight, no longer just as the future king, but as a competing embodiment of monarchy itself. Diplomats are caught in the crossfire. Embassies discreetly inquire, who speaks for the crown now? In Commonwealth capitals, negotiations grow awkward. Should a state dinner host King Charles or Prince William? When both represent royalty, but one commands the future, the choice is no longer ceremonial, it is political. Inside the royal households, a quiet rebellion brews beneath tailored uniforms and gilded ceilings. Staff, once unified in purpose, now find themselves divided in allegiance. Some align with tradition, following the king with fierce loyalty and a sense of final duty. Others, especially younger courtiers, see in William a chance for reinvention and are already reshaping operations in his image. Even service staff have started calling the two factions by names, the Crown Keepers and the Heirs Circle. The tension is palpable in every hallway, in every whispered conversation cut short when footsteps approach. This is no longer a family conflict, it is a kingdom in internal reformation. Meanwhile, rumours swirl with new urgency. Charles, already battling the weight of his reform legacy, now faces questions about his health that refuse to stay contained. One missed engagement, one unscheduled hospital visit, one photograph showing too much fatigue. And suddenly, the succession debate returns not as a long-term inevitability, but a pressing concern. With the monarchy already under siege from within, any sign of physical vulnerability becomes fuel for speculation. In the court of public opinion, the shift has already occurred. William's favourability rating now eclipses that of his father, not only in the United Kingdom, but across Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. Pollsters call it the heir's wave, a generational swing rooted in empathy, authenticity, and legacy. The public sees in William a reflection of Diana, of continuity with conscience, and with each public appearance, with each child by his side, he builds not only sentiment but momentum. Speculation spreads like wildfire. Is a regency on the horizon? Will Charles, backed into a corner, be forced to formally transfer certain powers? Or is something more radical emerging, an unspoken transition of influence, where the heir reigns in all but name? The palace remains silent, but the silence is not calming anymore. It's the sound of something coming. And so the silence ends not with reconciliation, but revelation. The war for the future of the monarchy has begun. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in next one.